What's up, gamers? Welcome back to another episode of the Meta Update. What's going on in Guard? What is happening in the world of Astromeltarm? It is a relatively short video again today because Guard is still. We're doing okay. We're kind of struggle busting a little bit. My name is, of course, Joshua Joshi Howard. Let's go ahead and talk about what is going on. I only have 4 lists to show you this weekend. So a big reason for that is it was a relatively small event or a relatively small weekend overall, not a huge number of players, and also there's a lot of weirdness being skewed with the World Championships of Warhammer going on this weekend. So I do have some data. I realized I forgot to do this last week, but I'll try and do this more consistently. So overall, Guard had a 47.8 win rate this weekend, 103 wins, 113 losses, and 8 draws. However, it is really important to remember that there's a lot of the games, a huge percentage of the games being played this weekend were at the World Championships of Warhammer. And if we remove that, if we just remove the World Championships overall, the number of games is basically cut in half. We go to 56 wins, 68 losses, and 4 draws for an overall win rate of 45.3%. A couple things to note about this weekend in general. There were way too many people playing Leman Russ Commanders. I don't really know what to say about this data sheet. It is just overcosted right now. It does show up in one of the lists that I'm going to show you this weekend. Part of that, so kind of going off of, we don't have like a super high game count this weekend, so it's not super indicative of a lot, is there were lots of small events, a lot of small events. There were not very many events over about 40-ish people. Most of the events this weekend were like 20 to 30 players, which is pretty small. And we had a couple of our bigger names like Lane Nussbaum, Andre Gorin, and Patrick Greatbatch, players who pretty regularly make our spreadsheet, having rougher weekends, only going 3-2. I think all 3 of those names only went 3-2, and they were some of the bigger names that played this weekend that did not have the success that I'm used to seeing them have. But that happens. Like sometimes, you know, if you're just having like an off weekend or whatever, or you hit the wrong matchups at the wrong time, no shade to those players at all. The other big thing to kind of keep in mind is part of why we had a lot of smaller events is because there were a lot of the strongest players around the world, not just in the United States, but basically everywhere around the world. The strongest players were in general at the World Championships of Warhammer, so that opened up a lot of room for like local metas where people are not just for Guard, but for like all kinds of local metas. You're gonna get some weird data this weekend just because when the best players who are typically like winning these events are not there and are instead at the World Championships. You're gonna get like a lot of the next tier of players starting to have a bit of success. So with that in mind, we're not looking too great. A lot of the big hitters that we had this weekend going at the World Championships of Warhammer, not necessarily having the success that I know a lot of them were hoping, but a lot of them were also only losing to like top tier opponents, like Gustavo de Sousa ended up losing to Kyle McCord, who made top 16. John Winter Russell lost to Folger Piles, who was last year's World Championship and I believe made top 8 this year. And then Wesley St. Hines lost in round 4 of pools to John Lennon. So we are losing only to very strong, or like the top players at the World Championships only really lost to top players. But with that in mind, I want to go ahead and show you some of the top placings. So, of course, we did have Wesley St. Hines going 6-2 at the World Championships, dropping 2 games, one of them to John Lennon's Emperor's Children, Code of the Conceded, and the other one to... I don't remember his name, so I'm not going to try and guess it. But it was Blood Angels, Angelic Inheritors, so something a little bit different, and that was a 96-98 loss. So really, really close game there. But if you want more thoughts on Wesley St. Hines, Recon, and thoughts about it, I did do a video last week about the list that he was taking to the World Championships. I have done multiple interviews with him. I have another video on Recon Element, so if you want to know more about this list and this style of gameplay, please go check that out. This is the exact same list, or a very similar list to what we've been seeing for a long time. It is Gaunt's Ghosts, Ursula Creed, 3 Cadian Castellans, 3 Cadian Command Squads. So the Castellans give the big bricks fallback and shoot and sustained, and then the Cadian Command Squads give them cover while they are in contact with an objective. So very good combination there for recon element. Then we have 4 bricks of 20 Cadians, 2 10-man Catachan units, 4 units of 10 Death Corps of Krieg, 2 units of 20 Death Corps of Krieg, 2 units of 10 Rough Riders, and 1 Scout Sentinel. Again, if you want to know more about this, I have a lot of other videos about it, but Wesley going 6-2 this year at the World Championships. The other player who was in the top bracket and was therefore having some of the toughest opponents was, of course, John Winter Russell. He was playing the combined arms list that we talked about last week. It was a Cadian Command Squad, Gaunt's Ghost, 2 Tempestus Command Squads, 1 Rogaldorn Commander with the Grand Strategist enhancement, Ursula Creed, 2 units of 10 Cadians, 2 Tauroxes, 1 unit of 10 Rough Riders, 3 units of Khazarkin, 2 units of 5 Scions, 1 Hellhound, 1 Lemur's Battle Tank, and 2 Scout Sentinels. So it's a lot of skirmishing pieces that come at it in a very different way. The Tempestus Scions, the main way that they tend to get used in my experience is you Rapid Ingress them, you go kill a character or a unit of like 5 scouts off of your opponent's natural, and then you flip primary. And it is fairly similar in points cost to like a Taurox or a Chimera full of Khazarkin. So it ends up doing a lot of similar roles with that in mind. And you do have the deep strike, so your opponent does have to respect the backfield a little bit more. But John Winter Russell did have pretty good event this weekend. Like I said, his first loss was to Folger Piles, which happened in round 1. So the dreams of getting a guard champion this year, at least from John, were dashed almost immediately. Still a 6-2 result against some of the toughest players in the world. Before I go on to the next one, I also want to give a quick shout out to Nick Gigello. He did not make the top bracket because he did get a draw in I believe round 3, but he did go 6 wins, 1 loss, and 1 draw. But not making the top bracket does kind of, I'm just not going to talk about him as much this week, but it was the same hammer list. If you want to know more about my thoughts on that, he did show up in a GT, I believe, two or 3 weeks ago, and it was pretty much the exact same list. So lots of tanks, making it very difficult for people to just get into shootouts with the list. Okay, we only have 2 more lists. The first one, this is at Broadside Wargaming. We did have Ben. I know this is an Irish name, which means I believe it's Keogh. It's a very guttural sound, I believe. Ben Keogh. As an American, I don't make that sound basically ever. So apologies for not getting the gutturality of it correct. But Ben did end up going 4-1 at Broadside Wargaming this weekend, and this is definitely one of those events that was it did not have the same kind of representation of a lot of top players. Either that or a lot of the players had a lot of ELO DK because they're not necessarily going to GTs as often, which makes it harder to determine exactly how strong they are. But anyway, Ben's list, he had Gaunt's Ghost, a Krieg Command Squad with the Grand Strategist enhancement. This is one of the units that I think is very surprising. We'll talk about that in a bit. He had 1 Leman Russ Commander outfitted with as much plasma as you can fit, the Executioner Plasma Cannon, and then 2 Plasma Sponsons. 2 Rogaldorn Commanders, 1 unit of 10 Death Corps of Krieg, 1 unit of 20 Death Corps of Krieg, presumably attached to the Krieg Command Squad. 2 Chimeras, 1 Taurox, 1 unit of 5 Rough Riders, 2 units of Khazarkin, 1 unit of 5 Krieg Engineers, and 1 unit of 5 Ratlings. And then to round it out, he had a Hellhound and a Scout Sentinel. Now, this is on its face fairly similar to the Gustavo de Sousa. He calls it the Recon Bind, with the 20 bricks of Cadians with the Castellan. So he still has the Krieg Command Squad here with the Grand Strategist. It does have the 2 orders, and you can have, I believe it's the once per game, give out a 3rd order. And then you have Gaunt's Ghosts. So it trades some of the like utility of the Cadian Command Squad and that, and you end up getting a little bit more. Like, it's about the same amount of damage actually from Krieg, if it is below starting strength, as it is a Katie Castlin, because sustained is very similar to +1 to hit. It's the same average, but just a wider, higher variance with the sustained as opposed to the +1 to hit. And then the big question mark for me is, of course, the Leman Russ Commander. Um, this is the There were a lot of people playing Leman Russ Commanders this weekend, but this is the only one that had a top placing. So it was really interesting. I'm curious how this was used by Ben. It's not something that a lot of people are talking about, and for good reason. The big thing here is, of course, it's just really expensive. For a similar price point, it's at like 235. We can very easily look at ways to have upgraded that to a third Rogaldorn Commander, which does quite a bit more damage. However, one of the things that I think people are kind of missing is that the shoot on death ability of the Leonar's Commander is still a very good ability. I know it gets turned off by grenades. I know it gets turned off by being in melee. However, it is still a remarkably strong ability. So if you stick this in an open firing line, and your opponent is a shooting army, they are going to end up putting themselves in a really awkward situation where if you kill it on a 2+, it's going to shoot back. And with all the plasma, it's going to do damage to something if it shoots. Other big thing about the Leman Russ Commander to note is that the Leman Russ Death Befitting an Officer ability does trigger if you hazardous yourself. So having the 3 plasma weapons, the 2 plasma sponsons, and the plasma turret does mean you can, like, if you're bracketed, you could shoot it once, probably hitting on 4s because you're bracketed, hazardous yourself to death, and then shoot again, hitting on 3s. So, it's a, it's a it's an interesting piece. I am surprised that this did as well as it did, but do want to give a congratulations to Ben on that 4-1, a name that I definitely have not seen before, but hopefully we'll see them more in the future. Next one, we have Wes Roderick Pauley with Mechanized Assault. That number is incorrect for his ELO. Let me go ahead and pull up the correct number real quick for y'all. Wes Roderick Pauley, his number is actually 1468.9. So let me fix that real quick. 1468.9. So this is one of those that I was kind of talking about as well. A player that we weren't really expecting to have this kind of success. And it was with a really interesting list. It actually has a fair number of similarities to what we were seeing from Robert Moreland, who played a 9 transport mechanized assault list a couple of weeks ago towards the beginning of the slate. But Wes is playing a Cadian command squad, Gaunt's Ghost, Lord Solar Leontis, 3 Tempestus command squads, 1 unit of 10 Cadians, 3 regular Toroxes, 3 Torox Primes, 3 units of Kazarkin, 3 units of 5 Scions, Leman Russ Exterminator, and then 3 Scout Sentinels. So it's just a lot of fairly efficient units overall in the detachment, right? You have the Toroxes with the Kazarkin inside, 3 Torox Primes with Tempestus Scions inside. So realistically, you can put a lot of sustained full reroll hits, full reroll wounds shooting out from this, and you have the Exterminator to help you punch into 2-up save bodies. The big thing as I kind of look at this is it looks like it's going to have some really sharp matchups where you're going to be really good into Marines, but you're going to struggle a little bit more into things that have like more 2-ups. And it's not super surprising here that with that in mind, Wes ended up beating Adeptus Mechanicus. The new White Scars detachment, World Leaders possess Slaughterbound, which is not a detachment you basically see at all. And then Canoptic Court Necrons as the wins, and then lost to Tau. So not hitting a lot of the worst matchups here for Mechanized Assault. Doesn't take away from Wes's success at all, but just keep that in mind if you're looking for Mechanized Assault lists to try and pick up. This is definitely going to have real struggles against things that have 2-up saves, especially if they are not on objectives. But if you're going to be shooting at a lot of Marines, this makes sense to me to have a lot of success. Very mobile, has waves of things to deal with. But if your opponent is able to like crack open the transports, like with Tau Retaliation Cadre, which was the one loss, it is going to be a tougher list to pilot in that way. So that is our last list overall for you guys. We do have only the 4 lists Wesley St. Hines, John Winter Russell, Ben Keogh, and Wes Roderick Pauly coming out as the people that have had success this weekend. If you're interested in learning more, of course, make sure you tune in, like, comment, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We will have more content coming out, as always, with all the fun stuff going on in the world of Warhammer and the Astra Militarum. For now, though, this has been Joshua Joshi Howard. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and we'll see you guys all next time. Bye bye.